Welcome to Keeping Up with Data. Keeping Up with Data is the podcast that keeps data enthusiasts up to speed with what is happening in the data world. We bring in the leading minds from the data industry to talk all things career, news, embarrassing stories, failures and successes.
So something really important for us here at Precision Sourcing is mental health. It's something we've been focused on a lot over the last year or so, and we're lucky enough to have partnered with the Black Dog Institute. And we're going to be doing a lot of events with them this year. A lot of our events, money will be going towards them. And they're out there aiming to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. So if you wish to support the cause, please donate via the link in the bio on this podcast, and you'll be seeing a lot more information about Black Dog over the next year. Well, welcome to Keeping Up with Data, a very special episode with myself, Joel Robinstein. And today we're not joined by any other Precision people because we have enough personality in the room with Annelies Tjetjep, otherwise known as Annie. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm super well. I'm really excited about today, Annie, because we've known each other a long time. We both like to talk. I know you've got stories, and I feel like today could be a very special episode of the pod. So no pressure.
No pressure at all. And I kind of feel like we're halfway through because we've had so many great chats just before we started recording.
I feel like it's like when you listen to a podcast and they're like, oh, we had all these great discussions beforehand. We've literally been sat here for 25 minutes now, nearly. So we're going to try and put all that into the podcast today. All the interesting stuff we spoke about Invisalign and dogs and eyelid surgery.
And baldness.
Baldness.
Yeah.
So all really interesting stuff that you want to hear about on a data podcast, right? Well, look, Annie, let's keep everyone up to date with who you are. I won't try and introduce yourself. Why don't you just give us a very quick overview of who you are, and you can answer that in any way you want, whatever it means to you.
Hi, I am Annie. Well, everybody calls me Annie, and the reason they call me Annie is because the way my name is spelled, I never thought was that complicated, but a lot of people who read it get very uncomfortable saying it out loud because it's spelled Annelies. It's Annelies. But it's spelled Annelies, and so people see it and they go, "Well, it can't be Annelies," which is the way it's actually pronounced, because that's usually Anna, and so there's a little bit more of a phonic support.
Yeah, okay.
But the way my name's spelled is not helpful for people who are trying to pronounce it out loud.
Annie's a lot easier for everyone.
Yeah, so I just kind of got to the point where I was like, just call me Annie. It's fine. It's a bit of a play off something my brother used to tease me, and he used to call me Annie Penny. I think it was to do with a play on Henny Penny, you know, like the hen who thought that the world was falling on her.
I don't know.
He basically thought I was overly dramatic. And
right.
So he just
Why would he think that?
I don't know. I know. Really? Honestly, right? And so... anyway, that's my name.
Nice.
And
so we've so far found out about your name, so that's a good start.
All right, maybe move on beyond my name. I have been working in the analytics data space for, like over 20 years now, I think. And it's just been quite a journey, and there's been lots of things that I've learned along the way. I spent 16 years working in the technology space. Well, I guess you could say I started my life a little bit in academia. Then I went to the technology space. And then for the last 18 months or so, I've been at PwC.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into a lot about your time at SAS, which is where you were for 16 years, because anyone who's anywhere for 16 years must have learned and done a lot with plenty of stories. Also talk about PwC. I think is a really good topic just generally that comes up on our podcast quite a bit. You know, what is it like in consulting, different kind of projects that you get to work on, and also like the aspects of that job that a lot of people don't realize, the sales side of things, which I know for you has been a new learning experience, which is great. I think we'll also get into maybe some amateur acting, which I know is a passion of yours. I remember what your party trick is, so we'll definitely get into that a little bit later. Make sure you do that. But why don't we just start from the beginning then? So you mentioned you started in academia. So Annie Penny, coming out of school, why data? Why stats? Whatever it was.
Stats? Yeah. I'm an actual bona fide mathematician.
Wow.
Which I think scares me probably as much as it scares anybody else. So it's an interesting one. I actually began life, tertiary life, really wanting to do psychology. You could probably tell I'm a bit of a people person.
Yep.
I like to have a yarn.
Yeah.
I like to give advice, probably not the best advice, but I like to.
The best kind of advice is you give to other people.
Thank you, yes. Yeah. So I just like to have that conversation. So I really wanted to get into really, and I've always been really interested in the way that people think.
Sure.
So, you know, why people do certain things, criminals and non-criminals, but just everyday behavior, really. So that was my goal in life. I was very desperate to want to go into this. And so that was kind of the beginning of, like, I suppose, my university. But my parents, being my parents, they were like, well, you've never actually studied psychology. and you haven't ever been a big fan of humanities and as a whole, so maybe not your calling.
Can you study psychology at school? Is that like a thing?
No,
though?
it's not.
Right,
But you can study literature and history and
Sure.
subjects which
But are they,
were
like-
never my favorite things.
They're not related to psychology, though. are
No,
they?
but like the humanities subject, you know, where you
Okay.
write essays and
Okay.
you know, that kind of, you know, that type of thinking and,
Sure.
you know. So in any case, I was never great at those things. So my parents were like, why don't you just stick with just safety subjects?
Nice.
Maybe just stick with a few subjects that you know you're good at. So I took on chemistry and maths. Chemistry I just loved. Maths I was just generally good at. So I was like, all right, I'll do this. And then second year of psych came around, and after a year of realizing what psychology was like as a subject at university, I realized that it probably wasn't for
Not
me.
for you.
I was like, nope, stubborn, gonna stick with it for another year. So I stuck with it for another year, but I ended
At
up
least you
having
gave
to.
it a proper go.
I gave it a proper go. I had to drop chemistry just because I had too many units. And then by third year, I was like, yeah, definitely not what I think it is.
So what was
And
it? Was it just like what I remember of psychology? Just a lot of learning about studies from like the 50s,
Yeah.
and that's it.
There was a lot of that, and there was a lot of you had to memorize what the studies were and
Yeah.
who wrote the studies and the variations, and then
it's
you
like,
had
who cares,
to
right?
you had to cite them all in
Yeah.
essays. And I think for me is I'm like a Wikipedia researcher. It's like, you
Yeah.
know, I can get really deep into subjects.
Nice.
But I'm not necessarily the one that's going to remember exactly who said what
Sure.
when.
You're really interested in it at that 4 a.m. moment in bed when you're really deep into it, but doesn't mean you want to remember it in 3 years from now.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I think just it's like, okay, I guess my parents were somewhat right. And then, it was kind of luck, I suppose, that I ended up just having lots of maths, and that was pretty much what I was left with. And so I ended up becoming a mathematician, and it's not a bad job. It's not like
Well, I mean, it was the right time to become a mathematician based on where the data industry's gone from 20 years ago to now, right? Fantastic opportunity to stumble into the fastest growing industry over time, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the things, I don't know, you know how like, I always think of myself as really lucky because I always find myself in the right place at the right time for a lot of things. And I think that's one of the lucky things that happened.
You
in my-
make your own luck too, right? You must believe. Yeah,
I
okay,
think
cool.
so. I think there's obviously an element of like, luck is all of the things that you did up until that point
Yeah.
to get to there. But
Yeah, it's like a combination of hard work, being at the right place at the right time, but also having that ability to take your chance. I just made that up. It sounds right though, right?
sounds right.
Yeah, cool.
I'll take.
Side note,
Yeah.
my dog is okay.
Yay!
That's good. Yeah, he's just come out of the vets, and he's got hair loss due to a stressful incident though. So I have no idea why he's stressed.
So was it like eczema?
Kinda, yeah. So he had to go to the groomers last time by himself because my other dog had hurt his paw, and he hates going to the groomers as it is. So maybe the fact that Hilton wasn't there meant Coco was really sad. But anyway, he's fine. That's the most important thing. That was a pre-pod conversation that we've got the ending to.
Dogs are so precious.
He's a little baby, this one, honestly. Like, he's 8 or 9 years old or something like that, but he's such a suck, so I'm not surprised he got anxious. Anyway, right, back to data-related things. So, maths, came out of uni.
Came out of uni.
Did a bit of academia, you've said first?
I did. I actually wanted to. I really like teaching.
Cool. Okay, cool.
So there's this thing when you go to uni, when you get to sort of like the honors year, they let you teach classes.
Nice.
So they just need the bodies to go and teach all the classes that they have, first and second year classes. So I started teaching classes, realizing how much I really liked it. I also worked in the tutoring center and things like that, and everything was great. And I actually wanted to be a teaching academic, but
I can see you've got teacher energy, by the way. Like, up there at the front, people listening. I get that. Yeah.
But at the time, and this is where things have definitely changed in academia, but at the time, they didn't do teaching only in academics.
Oh, so it's like you had to do...
You had to like
Papers
do
and stuff.
PhD, postdoc. You had to do all the research. You had to
Right.
get qualified, and then you had to get, teaching. Not a teaching position, it was mostly a research position, basically.
Okay.
Honestly, research. I tried my hand at it. I did I got coerced, and well, coerced is probably a bad word. Let's try to find a nicer word. I was influenced into doing.
It sounds like exactly the same as coerced.
A research master's. I knew after my honors year that research probably wasn't for me.
Right.
But I had done as a bit of a side work while I was like doing other teaching. I had started helping my professor, with some research for a paper that he had. So he came up with the idea that we might as well convert it into a thesis. And I was like, I don't really want to do another 3 to 5 years of a PhD. I don't think research is my thing. And so I got convinced that I could do a research master's, which is about a 2-year program.
Like in between vibes.
It's kind of in between.
Yeah.
So that's what I ended up doing. Research was definitely not for me, but it's weird though. Now in retrospect, like sometimes when you come out of a situation that you're not happy with, and then years later you kind of forget how bad it was.
Yeah.
And then you think back and you go like, I could do that again.
Oh God, no.
so there's moments when I think back and I go, if there was a topic that I'd be really interested in, maybe I could spend 3 to 5 years doing it and get my PhD finally. But I don't think so. Like, as I said, I'm a Wikipedia researcher.
Yeah.
I'm like, give me everything in one source and I'll read it.
And then that's it, move on to the next
And then
thing.
I'll move on to the
Yeah.
next thing.
And also, like, you're not a stuck in the room looking at research kind of person, right? You need the energy of the people around you.
Yeah, which is probably why, like, I was attracted to, like, disciplines like psychology and other things.
Yeah.
And I think if I did do a PhD, it would have to be something applied in that way. Like, it'd have to be something that actually required field studies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like talking to communities or like stakeholders,
Which
that
is
kind of thing.
Kind of against the grain of the typical what people see as a mathematician or someone who works with data, right? But you're like that human-centric data person. You're like, but everything in life is people, and the data is about the people rather than the other way around.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's very important to not lose sight of that. I think sometimes we look at the data and we get so deep into the data and we just...
You're saying data. That's interesting. Do you not say data?
Data. You know what? It's very...
How come you say data?
Is it because I speak with a generally American accent, so you get
Maybe.
confused and you expect me to say data?
Yeah, but like all Aussies say data, and then like sometimes I find myself like falling into it now and again. But no, it's data.
Yeah, like Americans say data too.
Yeah, so how come you say data?
British people say
British,
data.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next time around, I'll probably say data.
Cool. Okay, cool. All right. So you just mix it in between. Sorry.
It's a mixed
I'm
bag.
sorry. I just caught that there. and
I
was
like to keep people on their toes.
I'm on my toes now. It was very surprising. Anyway, so.
So yeah, I think we get really deep into the data sometimes, and datum, single data.
Put you on a
point.
spin now, haven't I?
Data point is
Yeah.
datum.
I didn't know that. There you go.
Yeah. But for me, it's always been about the people. It's been about what is the impact. What is it actually going to be used for? How is it really going to help someone? That's always been what's been the most important to me, because to me, I'm a very big why person.
Yeah.
So I don't like doing things without knowing why I'm doing it.
Yeah, okay.
So what is the point of looking at data? I mean, it can just be fun to go in and like delve into the data and figure it out.
Sure.
But if it has no real direct outcome or impact, it's a bit like you do all this work and it's like the tree fell in the forest.
But no one hears it.
And then no one hears it.
Yeah.
So who's going to...
care.
Who cares?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I hate that. I hate thinking that what I did was not
Not worth it.
worth it.
Yeah, okay.
Because I'm a very, like, high value. Like, whatever you do, try to make it as valuable as you can.
So do you think that's why that you found so much success at SAS? Because you're obviously selling technology, so therefore you're giving people the ability to do the why, and you're also able to talk to them about why they should be using SAS as a powerful tool, especially when you started at SAS, because it was just the one, right? That was in the industry everywhere. It was every role I recruited back then was you need to have SAS and SQL.
Definitely. Yes. Short answer.
Yeah, short answer.
Like,
Yeah.
I was just trying to bring Joel with me to every interview. So it's a great summary. For me, it was so maybe some of it is also influenced. I think some of it is by base personality, but it's like a nature-nurture thing. But I think also some of it was influenced by me spending so much time working in the pre-sales business at SAS. Because in the pre-sales business, you are always having to iterate the why, because clients won't buy anything if they don't really understand the why.
Especially when it's let's be honest, expensive piece of software.
Exactly. If it's like back in the day, you didn't have very much choice, but you had to like go for a commercial off-the-shelf software. Nowadays, you have so much more choice, right? So as time progressed as well, and then open source became more of an acceptable thing within organizations, you have to be even stronger about the why. You have to be stronger about why, not just analytics, but why commercial software, and all of the why questions. So I think some of it's also through maybe years and years of training and years and years of just like talking to clients. But
did it get really hard at the time when R came out? But even when R came out, everyone's like, oh yeah, whatever. But then all the people came across from academia with R, and the younger people started getting higher up, and they were like, hey, we can just use this product over here. So you really had to start selling more, eh?
It was definitely a challenge when I was at SAS. I think it was because it wasn't like a flip, like a switch flip.
No.
It was something that we noticed, because we're all from academia, right? Like all of us who worked in analytics or data, we had all come from academia at some point, and so we keep our ear to the ground, and we kind of knew it was happening. And like when I was, it's a long time ago, but when I was at university, we actually used something called S+, which is the commercial version of R.
Oh, really?
So R is like an open source version of this language called S+.
I was thinking it might be related to SPSS or something.
No.
Oh, okay.
I did use SPSS in my psych class though, so I was familiar with the language. But I was also like coming from academia, I kind of understood the difference between open source and at the time there was much more of a clear delineation between what you would use one thing for than another. But obviously over time, open source being as it is, it's all about crowdsourcing, right? And ultimately, if you get a big enough crowd and you get a big enough crowd that have like 10, 20, 30 years of experience behind them, it's going to be almost like comparable, right?
Yeah.
So it was definitely, but it was just one of those progressive things that you just kind of notice a little at a time, and then it became more and more of a serious challenge over time. But there's a time and place for everything. I even think that even now, like there's a project that happened a year or so ago where I've seen this happen a few times where if a client doesn't have anything, we just use open source, and that's just how it is, because we want to give them an outcome. But there were moments when I was working on this project where because I knew SAS so well, and I knew the things that made it so user friendly, and there were moments during the project where I was just like, shouldn't there be an open source package for this? It was like, I'm sure there must be, but you have to really know what the packages are. Versus if you just had SAS and we just use SAS, it would be easier, because things are literally called what you expect them to be called. There's only one version of everything, and then and there's lots of example code out there.
And someone who understands what customers need has developed it.
Yes.
With something like R, it was, I need this out of it, me, the individual, so I will put something into it,
put something in, but like that thing isn't going to be the complete picture necessarily. So that in combination with three other things, super powerful, but in it itself is only 1/4 of what you need.
Correct.
So that was kind of my thinking on this project and I've had this thought a few times since, and somehow sometimes there's a time and place for everything, It's just, it depends what you're trying to get at. It also depends who the client is, depends who the consultants are, it depends on the skills of everyone. It's just it's situational.
Exactly. And you know what, ease of use sometimes has to come out on top, which is why something like SAS is great, because of ease of use. And even with R was almost like a snapshot in time in the data industry. Like, people still use it now, but nowhere near what it was, say, 2012, 2013, where everyone was going crazy over it, thinking this is going to change the world, which it did change the world in the sense that it opened people's minds to the open source world, but they realized quite quickly the limitations of that open source world at the same time. And the industry kind of went back again to, just give me something I know that I can train everyone on really simply, really easily. Yes, we have to pay for it, but we get it.
And I think most organizations now are really, they commit to a hybrid technology stack now because they understand that there are situations where because of skills or because of the application that you're trying to do or what you're trying to do, the situation that you're in, that open source is the best solution. But there are also some other situations where having something that's a bit more well tested and rigorous and secure and also repeatable. So you do it this way, the algorithm's not going to suddenly change without people being notified 10,000 ways that something's changing in the next release. So definitely people a lot more hybrid now. But it's been a very interesting journey with in the technology space in that way. But I don't know whether I should tell the story, but I've thousands of stories. I've said it now. But I actually met one of the original writers of R at a conference, at a Statistical Society of Australia conference.
Nice person?
Yeah, he was a lovely guy.
Great.
Big bushy beard, Kiwi. And he actually said to me at this conference that it wasn't his intention, and I think he's actually publicly said this as well, that when they released R, it was really they only released it for use within academia. It wasn't supposed to become this commercially used software. So it's I think it was a big surprise to him as well.
A scary journey when that is going as far past where you expected it to go, right? And at any point it could kind of come back on you. Imagine I don't know, some sort of company was like, hey, your tool did this to our business, and he's like, whoa, it's not my tool, I'm sorry, it's not my fault you used it.
This is not a commercial license, this is not I know. But I think that's there's always that risk in analytics as well, right? Where there's always that balance, whether you're talking about technology or the algorithm that you're choosing or the type of data you want to analyze. People want personalized data, but they get really upset when they find out that their personalized personalized information that they're getting requires them
such a fine line in this world,
requires the use of actual very personal data. So
I think we're at the point now where it seems most companies, like you said, have accepted the hybrid model, because what we kind of gone from, we need everyone to do it exactly the same way, to let's let everyone do it however they want, to now being like, as long as we can enable our people in a relatively, repeatable fashion, then that's okay. I mean, even the technology we've got in our business, we've got some technology that none of the dudes use because they just don't want it, but other ones need it. But if I got rid of it, those who needed it would be really angry. So you just kind of got to create an environment that works for everyone. And I'm sure it's the same in consulting, like you said, where you go in and you can't go in being like, we have to use these tools.
No, it's definitely a bit of a toolkit situation rather than it being like a hammer for all jobs. So
which kind of SaaS used to be, though, let's be honest.
It was. But I found it also really interesting because while I was still at SaaS, even early on in the days of SaaS, even before open source became such a big thing to be used in commercial contexts, we always talked about toolkits. We always talked about the fact that you can't always just take one approach to fixing a problem. But I think that's also, to some extent, again, part of it, the nature nurture thing is, I'm a naturally curious person, which I think lends well to someone working in the analytics and data space. But also thinking about the purpose behind everything that you do and understanding this whole hybrid environment and how do you adapt into different situations. And so I think my life at SaaS actually helped a lot with that, because I got to meet a lot of different types of users and lots of different clients, and very small clients, very huge clients, federal government clients,
What's your favorite kind of client to work with?
They'll probably watch this and then they'll all be staring at me.
All waiting for
waiting
you.
For me to say.
All right, you better say my name.
I won't say any names, but I will say that the last few years that I was at SaaS, I worked primarily actually with the banks.
Yeah, okay.
I think they sometimes get a bad reputation. People go they're just bankers. They're all bankers. They're all just trying to get your money and everything like that. But
I don't think I've ever met a data person working at a bank that I've ever gone, oh, you're a banker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's
No.
not that typical what you think of a banker to be, is it?
And I think banking has changed a lot in
Yeah.
the last 20 years as well, to be honest. It's become so customer centric now. Even when they are doing marketing, they do risk-adjusted marketing modeling now, which is very much around, we won't try to push something on you and get more money from you if you are going to go into debt.
Yeah.
If we think this is not a good move for you. So I think there's a lot more thought that, but so I worked a lot with them doing a role I sort of started here in Australia at Sasco Customer Success Management, which has now been huge. So when I got the role, I used to go around and introduce myself as a customer success manager, and they were like, "That's a really cool title. That's a really cool title."
Are you taking claim for that title in Australia for every single company?
Well, I would have liked to, because a couple of months ago I started working on something with a whole bunch of 3 different vendors, and they all had customer success managers, and I was like, you guys,
if only you
knew.
I was the first.
Well, I was the first at SAS in Australia.
Sure.
But
that's not what you meant, though. You think you invented it, didn't you?
No, but even SAS globally, they weren't called CSMs globally.
Okay.
They were called customer account execs and things so they had different titles. So the title customer success manager, I don't think I was the first, but doing that role, it was a role that was in a way kind of created based on work that I had just been doing naturally, kind of off the books a little bit with some of these clients. And then I think in a lot of ways it was almost like a role that was, I wouldn't say created for me, but definitely suited me to a T, because it was the role, it didn't have a scope when it started. It was kind of like, Annie, do you want to do customer success manager? And it's kind of this. Or actually at the time, I think they wanted to call it customer adoption manager. And I was like, no, success is better.
Much better, yeah. So much better.
Let's not be too on the nose about what this role is.
Yeah. You need to kind of bit of mystique about the role.
Yeah, but I did a lot of that role was around going to clients and finding out about how they use the software, but also just generally how they did analytics, and then working with them to then say, how could you possibly use some of the stuff that you don't know about, to do things potentially better, to do more things with, basically just leverage the investment that you have. But through that experience, it was just so much working and with the client.
Yeah.
There was a lot of not just about case studies and use cases, but also just about enablement and community building and all of that. So I love that.
You were there for 16 years. As someone who's also been at a company for a long time now, I'm always interested to know how someone stays there for that long. What was it they gave you that you were like, I just have to keep staying here?
I think for me, it was opportunities. It was not like a 16 years where I never thought of leaving. I have to say, after the 16 years, when I did leave, a lot of people were really surprised that I left, because they were like, we thought you were going to be a lifer.
Yeah.
But
you would after 16 years.
Yeah, but I think through the 16 years, surprisingly, I never thought of myself as someone who would just work in the one company. I think it was, again, situational. It was luck. It was, circumstance. It was that I would want to do something different every couple of years, but it just so happened, demonstrated my skills and, worked quite well with people internally. And then there would be a role opening up in a different department, and then I would go, okay, that's interesting. That's different. It's a challenge. Let's go there. And then, and that happened a couple of times. And then I ended up finding myself into, landing in pre-sales, where I stayed for probably the majority of over 10 years, basically. Yeah. And then customer success management as part of that. Before I did that role, there was business solution management, which is basically managing the solution stack. And
so you kept growing, you kept changing.
Yeah.
It was different enough that you didn't feel same.
It felt almost like, it was a bit like you're walking up a hill. You're just kind of
I'm also imagining a slow
along.
Spiral without even any steps. You're just going up slowly, but
and then before you know it, you're kind of
top.
You're somewhere
and you're the
else.
first customer success manager ever.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a really good analogy, the spiral one.
Yeah.
Because it is one of those situations where you don't notice you are where you are.
You're not taking big career jumps and moving roles and this, moving companies and
I have to say that was what was great about SAS, in that at least while I was there was so many of these opportunities throughout my career. I think though, when I come back to that topic of luck, it was also because I worked really hard.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. You make your own luck, right? If you weren't good at what you did, the luck wouldn't have just come to you.
Exactly. But at the same time, so much of it was working hard, but also being in an environment where people acknowledged what you did. That wasn't always true, and it wasn't always true at SAS either, but there were definitely at crucial points in my career.
That's important. We did a survey, I want to say about 18 months ago, asking our candidates what is the most important thing to you in a job outside of, salary. Fine, we get that. And the thing that came top by a country mile was recognition. And recognition, not just on you're in front of the whole company being recognized for a big project, but just your leader coming in that day saying, hey, that little thing that you did there, great job. Notice that. People just want to be noticed.
They do. I was actually part of, unsurprisingly, I was part of a lot of social and working groups.
Yeah, which we're going to get onto next.
Yeah,
that was my next line of questioning.
But one of my things that I did years and years ago when I was at SAS was I was on the recognition team, and we were trying to figure out what different ways do people want to be recognized. And yes, there's awards, there's money, gift vouchers, all of that sort of stuff, promotions, but we also came up with this idea of like just like a letter to say thank you. Nice. And I know one of the things is when I hit, I think 5, 10, every 5 years or something like that, or even like after 1 year, Dr. Jim Goodnight, who's the owner of SAS, he would send you a letter. I'm sure someone else wrote it, but
sure,
it's not the
still.
point. But there would be the signature that maybe he did or did not sign, but
in pen.
But it made you feel
special.
Like in a company of 11,000 odd people.
That's
it was
thing,
like
right?
At least
it's harder to do in a company that size, right?
Yeah, at least they remembered. Someone remembered.
Yeah, we have that here. So every year you get your anniversary, you go for lunch with your leader, and then every 5, 10, 15 years you go out for like a big fancy meal, but we're only 30 people here, so it's super easy to do. And we've started doing a newish thing this year where we've tried to stop focusing on the end, which is the deal. You do a deal, everyone knows that's a good thing, right? We're like, no, a trainee just pitched their first meeting. We're like celebrating it like it's the biggest deal they've ever done. Like if we can celebrate the ingredients and the day-to-day, it makes it more fun. It means that the deal is just the end product of like all the hard work that you put in. We're doing that now. Social things.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about, I call it IAPA, you call it IAPA.
Yeah.
You've just had in November, like the really big kind of end of year IAPA vibes in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. You also are in your new role at PwC, working for someone that you, I believe, met or knew through IAPA.
Yeah, I did.
So obviously that's the opening statement. So what is it? This is a good time to plug it, I guess. Why would people be, I'm sure they probably know what it is already, but what is it? How are you involved? What's the vibe?
So I am the New South Wales chapter head for IAPA. So for those who don't know what those letters stand for, it's Institute of Analytics Professionals of Australia. I was not part of the naming of this. Like it is a bit of a mouthful. It's a bit of a mouthful. I do know a lot of the founders, so I'm looking at you guys. But
wow, you're just calling it out here. Yeah, okay.
It is a bit of a mouthful, but it was created in the early 2000s. In reaction to the fact that at the time there was really only like the Stats Society of Australia. There was only statistical societies and math societies, and there was nothing for working professional analytical people who are like data and analytics, but weren't necessarily or didn't necessarily call themselves statisticians anymore, because it was a little bit more on the business side of the world. So they created this institute really to bring people together, to share knowledge, to network, to build connections, and as you said, that's actually how I met my my current partner. And when you say partner at PwC, don't mean my partner. He's not my life partner. He's not my life partner. He's a very lovely wife, but he's basically the partner of the team, effectively, or the practice at PwC. And he and I actually were co-chairs of IAPA. We didn't know each other before. There was a vote. I'm pretty sure I lost the vote. I'm
Oh,
pretty sure
nice.
there were only 2 people up for the vote, and I'm pretty sure I lost. But and I did lose actually, and he won. I don't know by how much, but he didn't want to necessarily do it on his own. So
Sure.
he was like, "Hey, whoever came second, can I work with them?" So I came second.
Nice. And here you are.
So we worked together for a few years actually, and we would have quarterly meetings,
Yeah, nice.
and then we both kind of semi-retired from it, and then COVID hit and all sorts of things.
Sure.
So we haven't really had those meetings back up. But I think the chapter meetings, the plan is to kick them off again this year. So
Well, I'd hope, because it's the longest running networking group for analytics professionals, obviously, but also just the longevity of it is pretty amazing, because it's so hard to keep a community going and also keep a community interested. You know, obviously, like we've done events together with Women in Data, and then we've got the Data Jam series we run, and they are hard work to put together, and they're stressful, especially during COVID time, where you're like, is anyone even going to show up? Right? So, yeah, no was the answer.
The answer was no.
Yeah. But like, I guess, why are you interested in it, and why have you stuck with it? And also, like, how have you kept people interested as a group?
multiple questions there. I'll address the first part.
Cool.
The why, I'm a big why person, right?
Yeah.
So why did I get into it? I think for me, it's a couple of things. When I was at university, these types of associations didn't really exist. And even at university, a lot of my training was very academic. You know, when you study in a school of math and stats, it's very theoretically math and stats. And they had started to introduce topics that were things like financial mathematics, and like topics that were maybe a bit more directly connected to working at a bank or a consulting company or something like that. But it was very theoretical, and I remember thinking when I left, and especially after the first couple of years of working with in real life data, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many things I don't know, and I don't want people coming out of academia or anywhere else really, if they're starting their careers, to not have that, not know who to talk to, not have that, somebody to mentor, or not even mentor, just to share that information. And I don't think it was necessarily a thing that people didn't want to share. It's just that there were no forums to share what life was really like, with working with real data, and the struggles or the joys and all of that. You didn't really have that because you didn't have those associations. And so when I came upon IEPA, as I said, I know some of the founders, and so kind of word of mouth, it was very word of mouth at first. I started to realize that there's suddenly a group of people who all had a very similar backgrounds, because back in the day, you could only really work in analytics if you did a math degree or maybe a comp science, but generally math degree. And so similar backgrounds, similar ways of thinking, similar jobs in their everyday, in the way that they wanted to approach jobs. And so I was like, these are my people. Yeah. And not only that, we can help the next generation, or we can help just sharing our knowledge. And it comes back to that whole teaching thing that I have. Okay. And I don't think I knew that when I was at university tutoring classes, that I loved teaching. But I didn't realize how much I loved it until years later, when I would be teaching courses for SAS, and adult teaching is really different from teaching children. University students are not children. However, they're uni kids, right? So they're in between. Yeah. But teaching full-fledged adults who've been working for 10, 20, 30 years is quite different. But I had that same joy. Yeah, okay. And so I think it's all really connected for me. That makes sense. That just wanting to bring people together and have people collaborate and work together. And I find my favorite thing about going to a conference, to be honest, or going to even talking to clients, is actually just introducing people to people. I remember going to this one conference where all I did for 3 straight days was just during breaks introduce people to each other. Nice. I was like, oh, you haven't met, that sounds interesting. You'd like that person. Let me introduce you.
That's awesome.
Just walking around
You're
and
the
introducing
glue
people.
that holds the industry together.
Well, there are a lot of that. I'm not the only one that does it. I think it's something I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So
Well, if you enjoy it, that's why you keep at it, right? So with a group like that, do you find that you've kind of got the core crew, and then you'll put on events and people will kind of come in, come out, but you keep that core group of the network together? Is that how you've kind of done it over the years?
it is, and it's been quite interesting because sometimes the core group, for whatever reason, kind of goes away for a few years. Like, a lot of the founding group were like in their 40s or 50s now. So, different times in their lives, they stopped, had children.
Yeah.
They did big career changes.
Yeah,
they
of course.
did, things like that. So there have been these big, moments in the last, however many years is it now? Like 20 years?
Yeah.
20-something years? Where obviously there have been a changing of the guard in a way.
Yeah.
Like it's not the same people. But again, it kind of depends. People kind of ebb and flow, and they come back in, and people come back and go, oh, I want to re-engage. So it's nice like that. And I think the lesson really, though, is that the analytics community in Australia is actually quite small.
Yeah.
It is. It's really small. It was really funny. As I said, I've been working on this thing with some vendors, and one of the vendors I noticed, long story, but there's a lot of paperwork at PwC when you need to do anything. So I ended up having to look at like their C-level execs and things like that, their board members, and one of them is actually someone who I connected with on LinkedIn 20 years ago now, probably a bit more. But he's like the CEO of this company, but he used to do what you did.
Oh.
Yeah, he used to do
There you go.
analytics recruiting, and that's how come I knew him.
Oh,
like
cool.
I just came across him like over, through the traps, And then so it was really funny. And now he's the CEO of like this technology company.
Oh, great job to whoever that is.
Yeah. But also what was funny was that like the person I was talking to at that tech company was saying, "Oh, this other guy, right? Let's call him Max."
Sure.
He was like, Max, right? And I was just like, yeah. I'm like, oh, how do you know Max? He goes, oh, Max works here. I'm like, oh, that's crazy, because I've known Max for 20 years.
Nice.
So you just kind of...
It really helps with that long-term business engagement. So let's get into consulting, because it's a new world for you. It's a world that a lot of people find really very difficult to transition to after 16, 17 years doing something else, right? Because technology, right? It's different. Consulting is a whole different beast. And of the consultancies that I've worked with, the least highest success rate, if that makes sense, of people that we've placed, maybe in the first year, is at that kind of like associate director level in like a big consultancy when they haven't come with that prior knowledge. So how did you find that, or how are you still finding that transition? Because it's 18 months compared to 16 years.
Yeah, honestly, it's very different, and I would say that everything that you said is true. The biggest thing is that I think if you come from a tech world, even tech consulting, but you come from technology world or from a vendor or tech consulting, because you have done tech consulting or you've done, advisory work around technology or analytics, you naturally think, oh, it's a logical change and it actually makes sense, and it's and it shouldn't be that difficult.
Sure.
But it actually is quite a different beast, as you said, and that's because I think with consulting as it is, and also especially Big Four consulting, there's a lot of very structured process.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unstructured process as well. There's a lot of things that you don't really know about, and until like, there are things I'm still learning 18 months. There are things
I'm not surprised.
There are things that I've talked to people who've been at the firm for years, and I go like, oh yeah, I went to this thing and like this review meeting, and they're like, I've never heard of this review meeting before.
Really?
So I'm like, I don't know if the review meeting's new or if it's just, there are things that you don't come across because you just don't. There's so much scope. It's so wide. You're not doing the same
anything's viable,
thing.
right? If you find a project that can be viable, you just find
you
a way
just
of
do
doing it.
Yeah. But that's why it's like so unstructured in a way.
Yeah.
It's like it could be anything, and you could work with anyone, and it's so much bigger. So whereas like when you're in tech or in tech consulting, you're in a way, well, well, I'll speak at least for technology and vendor space. There are certain products. There's the product of the actual tech, but there's also just the product of what you sell, of how you sell it. There's a certain, equation, there's a certain formula around it, if that makes sense. And that, though, is in a way somewhat structured, and you always work you don't always work with the same people. I work with a global team, and SaaS was like 11,000 people, right? So you potentially could work with anyone globally, but in Big Four consulting, it's quite different. It's like everyone is very specialized in certain things. I found that quite interesting because I was always a generalist at SaaS, meaning that I just had the opportunities to work on pretty much all the products, the entire analytics lifecycle.
Yeah.
I can basically talk about the whole thing end to end, and in some areas quite a lot of depth. But at PwC, there are people who are so focused on one particular thing, but they're very successfully selling and reselling that application over and over again. But it's it's their brand, it's what they're known for, it's their specialization.
And you need them to do the projects with you, right? Because I think one of the things people mistake is that they think all your clients are external, but the first clients you need to have are those people internally, so you know how to work the system and do the projects, right?
Right, exactly. And in addition to that, I think it's also that definitely there's an element of working with this specialized. I think when you're a specialist, it's also, to some extent, I think maybe easier because
people know what you do.
Because people know what you do. Whereas, like, if you're coming in as a generalist or you're coming in with like, I can do everything, it's like,
how are you going to compete against the specialist if they want you to do the specialist thing?
Right, but also, how do you then sell? I can do everything. It's difficult. Like you need to talk with people, and you need to find the right client who are starting from nothing, or who are starting without that preconception of what they want, but who are also very open to hearing anything could come out of your mouth potentially. Like it could be, hey, this should be an optimization problem, or this should be a text problem, and they may not have thought about it that way. But it's doing that kind of solutioning, which is what I did a lot of when I was at SaaS, and it's what you do a lot of when you're in pre-sales, and probably in tech consulting as well. You kind of build that solution, you work with a client to build that solution out. Whereas like when you're in consulting, a lot of the time the clients have an idea as to what they want. You have to have very good relationships with them to like then go into that, let's build something from scratch kind of mode.
That makes sense.
And it's quite a bit different.
Daunting. And have you managed to use, you mentioned you work with the banks at SaaS, you know all these people through IAPA or IAPA. Is that how you've really tried to kind of leverage and work outwardly as well? Have you start with the people I know and then build out from there? Is that a route you've gone, or do you not like to utilize those kind of more personal relationships? Or is it somewhere in the middle?
I'll say I'm somewhere in the middle. I think for me, I do find it uncomfortable to use personal relationships because I find the way that I've built relationships over the years is that work kind of comes from it, or work is part of it.
Sure.
But I have, like, in the past not been measured against, I have to target a person to get a certain amount from them kind of thing.
No one needed anyone in your previous relationships. You weren't there for that reason of business.
Right, exactly.
You were there just because you shared stuff and thought the same, right?
It's for the greater good of the community kind of thing. So, so there's definitely could I use those relationships more? Probably. Yeah. Because I have some pretty good ones. But I think also it's just about finding the right thing for me to talk to them about.
That makes sense. And also that relationship might be a lot more valuable if in 2 years from now, it just so happens that you are there and they're involved in it somehow, and they're like, well, Annie's never really asked me for anything when she could have done, so I'm going to go all the way out my way to make sure that this is a major success, rather than you trying to extract something from a relationship when it isn't even there. I'd love to know just one more question about sales at PwC and just generally, like, how do you do it? Now, I know that's ridiculous, but what I mean by, because we work in a sales role and we do it our way in recruitment. Yes, there's some cold calling, there's some online outreach, there's some email outreach, there's some conference outreach. There's so many different ways of doing it. What have been your, I guess, avenues to market when you sat down on day one and they went, right, go and sell something? Like, what did you do?
I have to say that the majority of our work, just because of my particular team, is the infrastructure data analytics team. A lot of our clients are government clients, which means that they release tenders.
Do you do the tenders yourself?
Do our tenders?
In my new role here, I'm doing all the tenders, and I don't mind doing them, but God, they're long.
It depends. Some of them are very extensive. Some of them, like the one that we submitted a few weeks ago, was, I think, longer than any of us expected. And it was kind of like when you go through a tender document and all of a sudden there's like, oh yeah, and you have to attach this and you have to attach this, and it's like, what? Like, check this box to say that you have like acknowledged. And I was like, okay.
Nice. Okay, so you're not like frontline hardcore sales because you're in a government.
It's mostly
process
our clients are government. So yes, in that way, it is more tender driven.
Right.
You can go direct, obviously, to clients as well, and friendly clients, and see whether they'd be interested. So as we were talking about before. And there's also internal clients. So there's internal parts of PwC that don't have their own analytics people, because all our analytics people are 98% of the time they're out working for clients. So they sometimes, like, there's this thing that's on the table at the moment where a couple of managers from this team, lovely guys that I've worked with before on something else, and they were like, hey, we've got this idea about how we can make something more efficient. What do you think? And then they just kind of gave me
cool.
I had a little bit of a chin wag as like what they were thinking of, and I was like, okay, well, the solution could kind of look like this. So,
So this is those internal client relations you're talking. Okay,
and I think some of those are beneficial not just for you to do an internal project, but also just to build that network internally that you've proven, you've kind of in a way proof of concept your ability to help with their problem.
So are you feeling, not that you weren't straight away, but yeah, I'm sure it was a big culture shock for you. Are you finding now that you've been there a bit longer, knocking on towards the 2 years, that you are just starting to get into your groove and figuring it out a little bit more? It just takes that first year.
Definitely takes at least. I think the other problem with, and we talked about this a while back, is because I started in COVID.
Yeah.
I started in lockdown COVID.
Yeah.
so it was the
How do you even do that, right?
It was for an organization that is very much, it's so big, you really need that arterial network. You need that network. You need those connections. It was very difficult. I wouldn't say completely impossible, but very, very difficult to do when you are in lockdown, because people will schedule like meetings, right? And then they will be like, everyone's got back-to-back 30-minute meetings. And if you're on video call, that 30 minutes is done. Like, they will hang up on you. Wow. Whereas like, because they don't.
Well, no, I get it.
They're not being rude. They just,
Yeah.
Whereas like, if you were like, let's do a coffee. Let's go up to level 16 where we have like a little pop-up cafeteria and like free coffees for everybody. Let's go have a coffee. Like, there's the time that you take walking to the elevators. The time walking back to the elevators.
Yeah, that's the stuff that's more important than anything.
Yeah, and all of that kind of off, like the meeting conversations are really what I think is very, I think that's where I probably do them. I have the biggest impact myself.
No, that's what we say to all our guys. That first bit to the lift and the bit after is more important than the meeting oftentimes. It's what they remember. So
because I know I'm one of those people in a meeting, whether on your video call or if you sit down, that I just get straight into it. I just sometimes get really tunnel vision. I'm going like, don't have time, need to get straight into it. And like, so you sometimes forget the niceties.
Yeah, you do.
Or sometimes you take too much time in the niceties. Or sometimes, this is always, it's
Depends
always
on the
really
person.
hard in a virtual meeting to figure out the timing of everything. So
it doesn't flow as well. So from what I understand, and I know I understand because you've done this with me before, your party trick is that you can get given any topic on anything in the world and you can talk about it for as long as you want. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm going to give you a topic. I'm going to try and make it really specific and hard, because last time we did this, I feel like I gave you too broad
you talked about bears.
Badgers.
Bears.
Oh, bears. Oh, that's super easy.
Bears, yeah.
There's loads of stuff about bears, all right? And I've thought of this because of where we're sat. This is really difficult. I would like you to talk about the Radisson hotel chain.
Ooh. Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. Is that the one like right there?
Yeah, it's the one across the road.
Oh my gosh, I think I've stayed at that one actually,
Have you?
and it was really funny because I stayed in there with my ex-colleague from SAS, Mary. She and I are very close, and at the time we had gone to our friend Sarah's wedding, which was down in the east somewhere. I think it was Nelson Park, one of those Nielsen Parks, and
I
then
got
we
married
decided.
Where did I get married? Not Nielsen Park. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Stane Park? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but we were at the wedding, and then we thought, oh, let's just like, she was a single mother, but like, you know, she I think her son was with his father at the time, and then she was like, oh, let's just stay in the city for a night. So that's where we stayed. So
Nice.
that is the beginning of my discussion about the Radisson Hotel. Just like slipped it in there. So it is really interesting because I don't know a huge amount about the Radisson other
This
than
is
that.
why I tried to
but
give you this hard
I
topic.
know it's really difficult, but I can tell you a lot about hotels in general.
I don't want to know about hotels.
You don't want
though.
to general. You want to know about the Radisson?
Yeah, the
Hotel?
Radisson,
I know.
yeah.
Well, I have to say that was a really nice hotel, and I did always want to stay there longer. And I always regret it because we didn't get back until like 11 o'clock at night, and all we literally did was sleep.
That's a waste
and
of
then it was
hotel.
like done. Sorry.
That's a waste of a good hotel.
No, it was, but I think we got a deal on it. It was one of those like whatif.com kind of situations.
Lastminute.com vibe.
Yeah, what I can say about the Radisson Hotel is that it's not part of my hotel club. So I actually have a hotel club. I'm part of the Accor.
Yeah.
Street, which is like
So rivals.
Novotels and Sofitels and
Yeah.
all of those hotels and Pullmans, but no, the Radisson isn't. Do you know which hotel club it's part of?
No.
I don't know. I feel like it's probably part of a hotel club, right?
It must
Because
be.
like
Maybe
they're
they
all
have their
part of
own
hotel
one.
clubs. Probably like Marriott.
Yeah.
Like that seems about right. Which is quite interesting because here's an interesting fact for everyone. It turns out that like all of my American relatives, of which I have many, as you can probably tell, they're all members of Marriott clubs. Like apparently Marriott is
that like a
massive.
big thing?
Yeah, it's huge in America.
I tried to be a member of a hotel club once and just went, I can't be asked.
No, whereas here it's like only not. Yeah, it's not really. I mean,
That was a hard
it's a
topic you
thing.
gave me
It
there,
was.
wasn't it?
It
Yeah,
was. I mean,
I-
would you like me to keep going?
No,
I
you
can
can
keep
stop
talking
now.
about hotel
No,
clubs.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And you proved your point because I was like, that's a really hard topic to give someone. And you did very well.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I mean, the last time you guys asked me that question, I talked about bears.
Which is easy.
And then, you know what was so funny about bears? We were talking about bears and how it was, you know, there's a bear mug. And then we
Yeah.
were talking about how, like, I always think that they're really cute, but then all my relatives in America say don't hug them and
Yeah.
things like that. And then what was really funny was
you
that
hug the
not
bear?
long after, no, I didn't. However, I recently just came back from America. My aunt was getting married and she lives in Oregon, which is really forest.
proper bear central,
Proper
yeah.
bear central, like in this forest everywhere. But we, and aunt and uncle and I, we went on kind of like around Portland. We went up to the mountain, and there were like signs about like bears, like there's bears, and then the entire time there's like things like don't pet the bears and stuff. And I'm like, I was talking about
That's
that
you.
the last time I was here. It was just like
The sign
how,
is for
like,
you.
You really should not be petting the bears.
Definitely don't pet the bear. Did you see a bear?
No, I didn't. It was at the top of the mountain. It was like winter, but it's off season. I don't know. It was very confusing. It's at the end of the season, so
Oh, they're
no
hibernating.
bears. So they're hibernating.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So no cute bears to potentially
Cuddle.
pat and get my head bit off.
I'm really glad you didn't get to pet the bears. All right, one last question. You're in a zombie apocalypse, and you can have 3 people with you who are not your family. Your family's safe, they're in a bunker. Which 3 people do you want to have with you in the zombie apocalypse? Are you watching The Last of Us, by the way?
I am not, but
Oh
I
my
have
God.
it on my. I have it.
Yeah,
I
you
have
need
it
to just-
tagged.
come on.
I feel like I have to watch it.
Everyone,
right?
it's like,
and
you
it's
know-
Pedro Pascal, right? And he's
Yeah.
just like
Just,
Mandalorian.
yeah, right, which is back soon as well. It's on
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's Monday night, right? Because it was Game of Thrones on Monday nights for so long, which like it gives you something to look forward to. Then White Lotus was a big thing on Monday nights. It's The Last of Us. And if you're not watching it on a Monday night, then Tuesdays just aren't as good at work.
You know what I have been watching is Breaking Bad.
Oh,
because
what?
I
You never seen
finally,
it?
I know everyone
Wow.
like every time everybody finds out I've not watched Breaking Bad, I get a lecture.
It's good though, right?
I get it. Yeah, so I'm up
Yeah.
to season 4.
Oh, okay, cool. You're really in it then.
I'm
Cool.
into it.
Do you know
I'm
what?
I'm invested.
Another one of those shows that everyone talks about, The Wire. I never watched The Wire. I was just a little young for it, I think. And then I tried
Yeah.
to go back and watch it, and oh my God, it's so dated. It's so hard to go and rewatch.
It's
so,
hard. Yeah, no, I watched it a little late too, but I didn't watch it all the way. I think I only watched like the first and second season or something. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those that I feel like I also need to kind of go back and watch. Sopranos is another one. on. Have
Right.
not watched that. My
There you
brother
go.
was really into it. I never really got
Even
into
that now
it,
is quite
and-
dated when you watch it.
Probably.
There you go, Andrew. And I was watching that as well. Yeah, we tried to start watching that, me and Nicole, and we just went, nah,
No.
it's not for now. We need no. Anyway,
Okay.
zombie apocalypse.
Back on track.
Back
Zombie
on track.
apocalypse. Okay, so this is my answer. I would bring, and they can be fictional characters, right? Okay, because these are all somewhat fictional, but I wish that they were real.
Somewhat fictional?
People? Well, somewhat, because I wish that they were real, and for all I know that they will
Okay,
be real
sure,
one
sure.
day.
You know.
So the three are Mystique.
Yeah, great choice.
X-Men. She's
Very
she's
useful.
Amazing. Very useful. I mean,
like,
shape-shifting. Come on.
She could walk
And
through
also-
zombies and not think she's a zombie.
And also the whole
Spinny, kicky.
the kicky,
Yeah.
martial arts thing. I mean, she's
Yeah.
like badass.
Yeah, she is, to be fair.
And then Lilu from The Fifth Element,
Yeah.
which is still probably one of my favorite movies. I know some people might watch that and think that is a bit dated, but like it's like a lot
It's
of
a
those.
pretty cool movie.
But like it is so cool. Like
Yeah.
I just thought that the whole thing was just so great. And
I feel movies don't date as much as TV shows date. Like you watch a TV show and it's like, because you're really into the day-to-day life.
Yeah,
Movies are
that's
bigger,
true.
it's like grander, it's sci-fi and that. So anyway,
But I love Lilu, and also like thinking back to Fifth Element, and then Bruce Willis, and obviously he's having some health problems now too, so it's just
Yeah.
nostalgic.
Oh, yeah, isn't he?
But Lilu is also like that whole kicky martial
yeah.
arts, like oh my
Yeah.
gosh, defend me, woman,
Yeah.
because I.
You're like there, like,
I am the slowest. I am short
Turn
and have
into a
very
ball.
short legs.
Fall into a
Okay,
ball.
so I am the person who I'm all about feminism and
you
like
plan the
but I am not
attacks.
Yes.
You know, you're the strategy. You're the strategy person.
I am not physically fit enough.
Fair. Good to know your limitations. though.
I need protection. So exactly.
Yeah.
And then the last one is Maleficent.
Oh, she'd be so useful.
Yeah, like magic.
She just mess up the zombies.
I just did a BuzzFeed survey, which those BuzzFeed quizzes, which obviously just
People still do them.
yeah, they do.
Okay, cool. All right.
No, it
Sure.
was in my defense. It was shared with me, but like
Okay,
I
cool.
did it because I do it. If you've given me something, I
Right,
will
yeah,
do it.
okay, cool.
Did a BuzzFeed quiz,
And you
and it was
like,
to
what
do
Disney
with
character?
supernatural
Oh, okay.
characters and what you
Yeah.
would be, and I came out as the magician, so
Wow.
the magi person. So
Oh,
yeah.
so not Maleficent specifically.
No, I really love Maleficent.
But you
Maleficent
came out
too.
as like a magic.
Yeah.
Like almost like Dungeons and Dragons. Like which character would you be? The goblin? Would you be the magician? Would you be the no?
That is a game that I wish that I had learned to play too. I've
You know-
always wanted to.
I got taken by my American buddy when I was younger, like 12, to a Dungeons and Dragons night, and like I was always like sporty, but music and like nerdy stuff. I liked everything, right?
Yeah.
And I went, and I was so lost because they just went straight into this
Yeah.
role play thing, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on, and then that was it. Never did it again.
Do you know what though? I am looking forward to the Dungeons and Dragons movie, which
Yeah?
is coming out.
Is it meant to be good? Because all that Warhammer.
Well, it's got the
and
Chris.
World of
It's got Chris
Warcraft.
Pine. It's got Chris Pine in
Is he your
it.
favorite Chris?
My favorite Chris is Chris Evans.
Yeah, there you go. Right, you see, everyone's got different Chris's,
Everyone's
right?
got a favorite Chris, but like I really love. I was actually just thinking about Chris Pine the other day because I was thinking about how I really enjoy his Star Trek movies.
Oh, yeah,
like,
they're really
kind
good.
of. They're like my rewatch movies. Like
Yeah,
there's
okay.
all those rewatch movies, but they're some
John
of my
Wick
rewatch
is my
movies.
rewatch movies. Me and
Really?
Nicole
But
love
it's so
John Wick.
devastating.
No, but he gets
I
revenge
can't-
and gets a
I
new
know,
dog.
But I can't. I
But he
literally.
gets a new
I
dog.
can't get past.
You have
like,
to just skip that bit.
you have
That's
to
what we
skip the
do.
first
We
half
literally
hour.
skipped the dog bit, and then we're good. John Wick 4's coming out.
devastating.
I know.
Oh
No one
my
cares about his
God.
wife. Like the fact his wife just died.
I know,
It's
that's
just, it was like, oh no, the puppy's dead.
No, but it was just so sad because she gave him.
I
the
know.
puppy. I mean, we really shouldn't be spoiling it for people who haven't watched this.
If someone hasn't watched John Wick 1 by now, then it's their own fault. I'm
You
sorry.
are not allowed to watch this podcast.
Yeah, no,
According to
no,
Joel.
no one's listening now anymore. We're like an hour and whatever in. Like, no one cares. It was like you're not even talking about anything anymore.
Oh no, but yes, Maleficent. Now, so my whole they're all women who are kick-ass, who
Yeah.
who are independent as well. I think that's what I love about it. But they all have real, they have real heart.
Yeah,
Like they
okay.
really they're actually all very emotional characters, very much attached to the people around them, even if it's not obvious. And so they're tough on the outside, but they're actually...
I love movies where the baddie becomes like relatable, and Maleficent was just nailed that. You were like so on her side.
Yeah.
So I get that completely.
Yeah, definitely. And if you... Actually, what was really interesting about the Maleficent movie was because it came out after... the book that Wicked is based off, like Wicked the musical. And Wicked the musical is one of those kind of stories, right, in a way. But if you read the book, it actually goes into it in a lot more depth. And actually, the book is not for children. It's very non-PC. There's some very dark things in that book. But it's by a writer who wrote a couple of stories like that. He wrote one around the Wicked stepsister and things. And I love, like, you know, I like that other side of the world. Maybe it's that psychology thing, full circle.
Yeah, no,
like,
100%.
You know.
Well, I was about to talk about The Last of Us, but you haven't watched it, and that would be a spoiler. But anyway, on all of those bombshells, we have to wrap it up. Maybe we can cut out some of the boring stuff about your career earlier.
I know, like do that. You know? Add all this pop culture stuff. It's
we
so
need
much more interesting.
like a side podcast. Pop culture with data people or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
You know?
Do you know how popular that would be?
Really?
Yeah, because you know, like, there are no more biggest sci-fi geeks than, like...
That's true. And every time we get into stuff like this on the podcast, like, I'd say 80% of the people that we've had on really, like, want to talk about this kind of stuff and just have a bit, like, of fun. So maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
But you told me the last time about who, like, the most popular person...
Dennis, Spanish guy, half of Spain, watched it. So he's like up
no,
there.
not popular podcast. I mean, popular person to bring in a zombie apocalypse.
Oh, The Rock.
Yeah.
Everybody wants The Rock.
Which is, I know he's like super strong and all that, but like it's...
But he seems really nice to hang around as well,
He does.
right?
I get it. But like at the same time, he's also got a huge ego. And like...
Yeah, but like there's not many of us left, and you know... I'm not saying I'd take The Rock, but everyone wants The Rock.
That's true.
Big guy, gets in the way, nice dude.
He's
Must have
like
a big ego.
giant, like
Literally
giant teddy bear.
I reckon I'm quicker than him too.
Do you?
Well, I mean, he's huge. He can't be quick. Like sprinting, like he can't be that quick, can he? Because you don't have to be the quickest, you just don't want to be the slowest. Isn't that the thing?
That's true.
Yeah.
And also he's got so much body mass, like lots of places to bite.
Yeah, and
Lots of places to bite. Not a practical choice. Definitely go for like the least females that can, you know,
well, this is the other
cartwheel
thing.
away.
This is the other thing that like is fun because you pick 3 women. Is that like most people who come on pick 3 dudes, but like even
are they mostly dudes?
Yeah, but also the women we've had on the podcast have picked mostly dudes.
I
So
guess it's the obvious choice, but I don't know. I know myself quite well, and I know what I need.
yeah, strong women around you.
Like strong women, and you know, I wrote a blog for you guys like
Yeah,
a few
exactly,
years
about
ago.
female superheroes.
Oh yes, yeah, and that's the thing. It's, you know, like strong women, but also very smart women.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, and if anybody's watched The Walking Dead or any of those
Yeah.
shows, the one thing definitely short of in the world is intelligence.
Oh my God, seriously. So so I've watched The Walking Dead, but Nicole hadn't, because she's loving The Last of Us. Nicole's my wife. She's like, let's watch. I was like, do you want to watch The Walking Dead? And she was like, yeah. And I'm like, we just finished the first season and a half. We're keeping going. And I'm there like, oh my God, seriously, I can't believe I've got to go through like watching Carl grow up again and like Shane just being an idiot.
No, you
and
have to watch it again.
Yeah,
No.
but I love it. It's great. But then I'm also like,
although I did stop in season 5, so I've got like a few seasons that I need to watch.
so
I
I
need to
stopped
keep
at
watching.
season 6, and then so maybe I'll keep watching this time. Anyway,
Yeah.
shut up. We're gonna go. Right, we have to finish. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you everyone for listening. If you're still there, Annie, it's been awesome having you on. Thank you so much. I hope you had fun.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Precision Sourcing.
Hooray!
Yay!